Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Nishampkin. I'm the president of the Bradley Beach Historical Society. And today we're going to have a presentation from Bob Flood. I'm going to hand it over to him in a minute. But first, I'd like to thank the Bradley Beach Business and Community Alliance for making this the initial program in their Alliance Week, which starts today. Bob and his wife, Sue, have prepared a fascinating historical view of the early days of the beachfront in Bradley Beach. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Bob Flood. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'll set up the slideshow and we can go ahead and begin. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go on a time travel tour of the Bradley Beach beachfront. As we begin, we're going to be back in approximately 1870.
Hi.
In order to help us preserve bandwidth, I'd appreciate it if everybody could make sure that during the presentation that you have checked the mute and stop video. That will really help. We have people from all across the country, the West Coast, Southwest, and Florida, and elsewhere. To ask a question, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will respond to the questions at the end of the presentation in the order in which the questions and comments are received. Thank you. Not letting me proceed to the next slide. I'd like to, in appreciation, express a couple names to you. Hannah Newman and Regina McNerney were two of my early teachers at Bradley Beach Grammar School. Between their inspiration and encouragement on local history, and also my grandfather and my father, I really got the bug early about history in general, and especially local history. In putting together today's program, Paul Nishampkin and the Bradley Beach Historical Society have been extremely helpful. And finally, I want to wish a very big thank you and appreciation to my wife, Susan, because she has done extensive research and support. The Bradley Beach beachfront will begin, as I mentioned, at about 1876. There's a noble beginning in 1877, which is going to be followed by an era of essentially no growth, followed by 20 years of private construction. And when that culminates, there are going to be some great condemnations. That will be followed by concurrent public constructions in which they will build a beachfront for the 20th century. Ocean Park is part of Ocean Township as we begin the story. It will become part of Neptune Township in 1879. Bradley Beach will incorporate in 1893, and it's going to almost double in size when the eastern portion of Neptune City votes to be annexed by Bradley Beach. This is a topographical map, and it shows, as you look very close to the coast, that there is a sand dune bluff. It's a primary sand dune, and it's on the ocean side about 10 feet above sea level. There's also a 27-foot knoll just set back from what is today Ocean Avenue. There's a scattering of secondary dunes that would go right into the 100 block of present-day Bradley Beach. Two key investors that buy virtually all of the property, at least most of it in Bradley Beach, are James A. Bradley in 1874. He buys the entire beachfront, which we're going to be focused on. The only slice that he doesn't get, you can see on this map, it's illustrated in the color brown, and that's been owned by William Bradner since 1871. As we go through the talk, you'll notice that building shapes will be influenced by that line. Access to the shore began, at least as far as railroads, in 1875 when the first train came in from New York. And then just 2 years later, a route was developed by the train system so that people could commute to the Jersey Shore on the north route from Philadelphia. The very first building constructed on the beachfront is the Infants' Home. This is kind of interesting because in all of the material that we followed for decades in our research and study of Bradley Beach, most people believed that the first building was constructed by James A. Bradley, but we found that this was something that preceded anything he owned. The Infants' Home, not only the first building on the beach, but it was for really a special cause. It was dedicated in 1877, and I noticed that this year, on August 23rd, we're going to have the 125th anniversary of this event. The Infants' Home out of Philadelphia cared for infants under the age of 4. And every summer for the next number of years, they will bring 30 to 40 babies each summer for 3 months or so with their nurses from Philadelphia. I want to point out that this photo was taken about 30 years later, so there are other buildings in the view. Ocean Park, the area that Bradley Beach was known as before it was incorporated, did have events that made the news. In 1878, there was a fire that burned 200 acres of woodland. Ocean Park only had about 240. Illegal liquor was sold on a Sunday, and that made the news. In 1879, they had the first of 3 annual AME church camp meetings. A rifle range was established on the beach for Company A of the 3rd Regiment. And in 1883, the Mabel Thomas, a large 3-masted schooner, ran aground on the southern end of what is today Bradley Beach. The Asbury Park Press, reflecting back on this, said that between 1870 and 1882, about 3 houses were built annually. And from 1882 to 1889, hardly a building was erected. In January of 1883, James A. Bradley purchased the Infants' Seaside Home. This beachfront landmark was thereafter known as the Bradley Beach House. The home for infants never again has a summer house. After decades of service and perennial financial difficulties, the charity eventually merged with the Children's Bureau in Pennsylvania in 1942. The words Bradley Beach were painted on the roof of the Bradley Beach House, the south-facing roof. It served as a small seasonal hotel for the next 4 decades. Summer-long guests included the Russian ambassador to the United States, and the following year, the Russian naval attaché. He was overseeing the construction of warships by the United States for Russia at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. This is the view from McCabe Avenue looking north. Anna Kent had an Ocean Avenue house. It was her summer residence for more than 20 years, starting back in 1886. The Asbury Park Press described the house as the elegant brick mansion in the southern angle, formed by Fletcher Lake and the sea. In the pictures, you can see its proximity to Fletcher Lake, which used to spill into the Atlantic Ocean. Mrs. Kent added a wooden bridge across Fletcher Lake at her own expense in 1888. She called the place Kent Home. And after about 20 years, it went up for sale in 1908. It becomes the Hotel Lake and Sea in 1912. And as you can see, there's an enlargement as it's remodeled to house more guests than the original house. The beachfront encampment for orphans develops in the same area, just south of the Kent House. This is a product of the Jersey City Home of the Homeless. In 1892, the Ocean Grove Camp Meeting Association lent a tract of land in Ocean Park to the Home for the Homeless. Area volunteers erected
Surround
tents,
mode transmit.
other buildings, dug a well, and donated food and lumber. In 1897, the Ocean Grove Camp Meeting Association sold lots number 798 and 799, which are depicted on the map, sold them to the Jersey City Home of the Homeless for $1,200, so they continue their work into following years. A plank walk, according to the Ocean Grove record of 1893, is something new that Bradley has installed, and more than 100 bicyclists, about half of whom were women, bicycled the length of James A. Bradley's new plank walk from Fletcher Lake Bridge down to Avon, and then back to the Bradley Beach House, where they were treated with cake and ice cream. He develops a brick walk in 1907. It's a 12-foot wide brick walk, but it only goes from his Bradley Beach House on Park Place Avenue south towards the Avon border. The first really big investment in Bradley Beach doesn't take place until 1895. Henry B. Koster of Rutherford opened pavilions on the north and south side of Union Avenue. You can see those on the map. The pavilions included a restaurant, hot baths, a large heated saltwater swimming pool, and hundreds of bathhouses. This is an early photograph of Koster's pavilions. On the left, we have the indoor pavilion. Out of view behind that is the restaurant. There's a large outdoor pavilion. And then on the right, which is on the north side of what became Newark Avenue, on the right is the hot saltwater pool and the bathhouse pavilion. Over on the right on the map, you can see the approximate position of the photographer that took this picture. He would be north, or she, north of Union Avenue, looking towards the southwest. Koster's pavilions, again, had a pool, and this photo was taken north of Newark Avenue, atop a row of bathhouses, and looking north into the pool, and you can see Ocean Grove up in the background. The first news of someone actually bathing at Ocean Park was back in 1879. An Ocean Grove man bathing was attacked by a shark. The Monmouth Democrat reported that, quote, "the wound is serious, but not dangerous." The big news, however, comes some years later. Shark attacks in New Jersey between July 1st and July 12th of 1916 resulted in 4 deaths and 1 injury, causing really great alarm. Koster installed steel nets with small mesh to protect the bathers at his beach. In the mid-1890s, Henry Koster had previously installed life ropes for bathers and advertised that his bathing beach was open all day on Sundays, which was not the case in Ocean Grove or Asbury Park. Pound fishing was an important early business in Bradley. It started in 1896. Pounds, or fish traps, were established about a half a mile from shore, and surf boats would head for the pounds by 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Later, large crowds frequently assembled on the Cliff Avenue beach and the boardwalk to purchase fish or to simply watch the operation of the boats returning to the beach. Woolley's Fish Market on Newark Avenue operated a pound fishing business from 1905 up towards the end of World War II. Koster constructed the Beach View Hotel in 1899. Afterwards, the Beach View Hotel Company, formed by Joseph W. Eller and 4 others, managed the hotel and pavilion properties. And on the map on the right, you can see where this is in conjunction with the previously built pavilions. The Beach View Hotel in 1900 saw some nice improvements. First of all, there was the grading and graveling of Neptune Avenue, that's Park Place Avenue. And that's pictured in here on the bottom left. And again, this is on what is today the beach. The addition of a pedestrian bridge built over a gap on the hotel's south side was constructed, and the piazzas, both on the front ocean side and on the street side, were constructed. Koster's becomes known as Eller's. In 1905, Joseph W. Eller, the former Essex County surrogate, became the proprietor-manager of the Beachview Hotel and Pavilions. Over on the right, I mentioned one news item, and that is that there was a small fire set on Halloween. Well, the pavilions and the hotel would always be vacant in the off-season, and 3 youths who were seen running into Ocean Grove over the bridge supposedly were the culprits that set the fire. Fortunately, it was a small fire, was caught in time, and it only resulted in about $100 worth of damage. Thomas F. Somers opened the Boston bowling alleys, billiard, and pool rooms on Union Avenue, that's Newark Avenue, in 1901. Richard McNeely was the general manager, and Charles Truax was in charge of the bowling alleys and the billiard tables. Again, on the map, you can see the location of this on Ocean Avenue on what is today the beach. The Lorraine bowling alleys are an outgrowth in 1907 of the Boston bowling alleys, and they're equipped with Brunswick and Bolka calendar manually operated pin setting devices. Later improvements brought the number of alleys in the building to 8. The Atalanta Casino is also built by Thomas F. Somers. In addition to vaudeville, projected motion pictures, and illustrated songs and dancing, the casino had stores, including D.H. Hill's Pharmacy and Soda Fountain. This was done in 1903, and again, you can see it's occupying the northeast corner of Newark and Ocean on the beach. The Lorraine Casino, there's a billboard showing some of the vaudeville acts they have. In the center, there's a D.H. Hill's advertisement for a cooling drink. Doesn't look like a very safe fan to me, but on the right, the casino was also a gathering place for social events, a lot of public meetings. They even had Catholic and Protestant religious services there in the summer. There were 3 houses initially constructed on the beach, known as the Heaton houses. Florence B. Heaton built 3 houses, originally on a lot originally owned by her father, William B. Bradner. This photo is of the corner house. Take a look at the map on the left, which shows that line I referred to earlier, the property line dividing Bradley from Bradner properties. And as you look at the buildings on the right, you can see how the influence of the property lines affects the structure of any constructions. In 1908, we have the annexation of the eastern portion of Neptune City. The line basically goes through 5th and 4th Avenue area. And following the vote, there were fire bells, gunshots, and bonfires to mark the occasion. The borough boundary line south to Sylvan Lake, increasing, obviously, the length of the Bradley Beach beachfront. The 4th Avenue Bathhouse Pavilion is constructed around the same time as this annexation. Bradley announces it in 1906, and it's constructed in 1907. And I think this had some influence on the people in the lower portion of what is today Bradley Beach. This opens in 1908 on what would basically today be between 4th and 5th Avenues. It's a very unique building, with the 4 corners being summer houses of an octagon shape. Mr. Bradley had his brick walk wrap around the east side of his bathhouse pavilion, bringing it really quite close to the bluff edge of what is already now a flattened primary sand dune. You can still see that it is elevated somewhat above the lower beach. The Monmouth Enquirer talks about the fact in 1907 that Bradley has completed his brick walk, and that's depicted on the map here on the right in red. And as you can see, it only goes from the Bradley Beach House down towards Avon. Thomas F. Summers, who previously constructed the bowling alley and the casino, now opens a very large hotel, 254 rooms. This is 1907. It's at the corner of Lorraine and Ocean. And I show that on the map. They advertise that they have a veranda with a magnificent ocean view. He actually purchases an electric bus for $5,000 to transport guests arriving by rail to his hotel. They offer hot and cold seawater baths and showers, and they have electric lights, rooms with or without bath, and elevators. You can see it's centrally located because if they go south, any residents of the hotel will be able to get to the bathhouses. And if they go north, they can go up to the casino and the bowling alley and the other structures being erected up by Newark Avenue. In 1910, there was some major construction, and it's based upon the fact that the Pleasure Bay Amusement Company of Long Branch announces that they're going to erect a carousel across the street from the casino. Now, that means that that land will definitely increase in value, and immediately the Bradners place ads for 25 carpenters to build 3 stores, but other stores are also built. In the photo on the right, the Bradner's Pharmacy is up on the left. Fogarty's Airdrome is just south of that. Later, Moffat's Ice Cream, although that was preceded by someone else that we don't know who the original tenant was. Then there's something called Gillen's Rolling Chairs. And south of that, Mayer's Tailor Shop. And then another picture of the casino. Bradner's Pharmacy, depicted in the large picture, is constructed by Dr. William K. Bradner, the pharmacist in town, and he's the son of William Bradner. It's really the northernmost business at the beachfront, and that's depicted on the map. C.J. Fogarty's Airdrome was a roofless tent structure that showed motion pictures and illustrated songs, with the, quote, singer being a large phonograph machine. It had raised seating, and they could accommodate up to 500 people for evening shows when it didn't rain. Admission was 10 cents. Moffat's Ice Cream Parlor, as you see on the right, for 5 cents, you could buy an ice cream cone or get an ice cream soda, or get a hot Frankfurter on a roll. They sold locally made in Asbury Park Croce's beverages, and you could even get Tutti Frutti gum. The Adams variety was the most popular of the day. The rolling chair business was operated by Charles H. Gillens, and this business was immediately, just north of the Lorraine Casino, just beyond Mayer's Tailor Shop. The chairs could be rented with an option of hiring a chair pusher, which in most cases would be what you would want to do. I don't think you would want to try to wheel one of those while you were in it. Mayer's Tailor Shop being next to the casino, Mayer also at one point leased and managed the casino back in 1909. I thought the ad was interesting from 1912. He's looking for a boy for the tailor wagon. What I picture here is a wagon that is being rolled around some of the streets of Bradley Beach to either deliver or pick up articles of clothing. James A. Bradley had, on a number of occasions, brought things to the beach. Surf boats, and this is a picture of only 2 of them, but quite a few of them were brought to the beach as playthings for children, so they could climb in a boat and imagine what it might have been like to go out fishing in one of those things. He also relocated what has become known as Old Salt or Mr. Dooley. Also, it has the myth of being the New Era Monument. This was brought in 1909, and it lasted for 20 years until it disappeared in a storm. It was basically Bradley's life-sized metal statue of a sailor. As you can see, it's placed on a wooden platform atop an old spar. In 1910, Bradley brought a raised pavilion from Asbury Park down nearby to this sailor. And in 1912, when they built the new Bradley Beach rail station, the one that's still there, he moves the old railroad station to the 2nd Avenue Beach. In 1913, bricks, and I mean lots of bricks, tens of thousands of bricks are brought from Asbury Park to be used to form a wide brick plaza around the old railroad station that's now on the 2nd Avenue Beach. Also relocated was the former Railroad Square bandstand. This is brought down in 1912 onto the Cliff Avenue Beach. Let's take a look at those sand dunes. As we'll see when they construct the boardwalk, all of these dunes will be totally leveled. A carousel and an ice cream parlor also come in 1910. As promised, the Pleasure Bay Amusement Company constructs a building to house their carousel. It's on the northwest corner of Newark and Ocean. And pharmacist E.J. Wolfe opened an ice cream store on the southwest corner of Newark and Ocean Avenues. This is what the two buildings look like. You can see the Carousel building in the center, and on the left is E.G. Wolfe's ice cream parlor. Another view, this is a Newark Avenue looking south, the casino on the left, the bowling alley on the ocean side on the left. Further down the street are some of the houses that are constructed. Eventually, there's 5 houses down there. And then over on the right side, on the west side of Ocean Avenue, you can see the Carousel building and the E.G. Wolfe ice cream parlor. When you look at the Carousel building and you look at, it looks like it needs a fresh coat of paint. I believe this photo may have been in its final year of being there, and that was 1913. They started off nice. They gave free rides to the kids on the merry-go-round, and then in the center, as you can see, a month later, the court is asked to suppress the carousel. Over on the right, because of the reaction to what the court is suggesting that they do to muffle the sound, they're going to attempt to remove the organ. They're going to try a piano. They're going to muffle the piano. They're going to do a whole bunch of things to try to get the problem of the noise that's disturbing the neighbors. Now, picture yourself trying to get the kids to sleep at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And even yourself, if you've been working around the house all day and you hear this music, I'm not sure how much you're going to appreciate hearing the same music essentially over and over. There's a short repertoire that would go on and on and on. In any event, the carousel is going to be gone by November of 13, and Danceland is going to lease the buildings the following year. This is another view. This view is on Newark Avenue looking towards the ocean across Ocean Avenue. A carousel on the left, actually the back side of the building of the E.J. Wolfe ice cream parlor doesn't look as attractive as it might from the front. But the casino and the bowling alley and the other buildings are doing quite well financially. Tennis becomes a really big sport at this same time period. It's already been established at the Lorraine Hotel, and now those are private courts for the residents of the hotel. But in 1912, the courts are open to the public on the southwest corner of 5th and Ocean Avenues. They even install night lighting on the public courts in 1914. On this map, you can see that additional courts are located in 1926 down on the plaza area at what is today the 2nd Avenue Beach. And in the distance, you can see the casino up at the casino bathhouses up at 4th Avenue. There are changes at the four corner properties in Newark. When the Danceland building comes into, or they take over the building of the old Carousel, E.G. Wolfe decides to cease operations. Once the Carousel is gone, he feels like he's going to lose most of his ice cream business. And on that site, on that corner, a man by the name of Pierce broke ground for what became the Strand Theater. So we now have two theaters. There's the Atlanta Casino, that's an indoor theater, and the Strand Theater. And you also have the outdoor theaters, which are only in fair weather. Other changes at the Four Corners, talked about Danceland. In 1914, the proprietor of Tango Hall at Danceland skipped town, owing debts and payroll. Bradley Beach resident Viola Aguero became the new proprietor. Newspaper articles of the era indicate that Danceland was used for things like the police department's first annual masked ball, events like the lifeguards' annual dance, and the firemen's fair and carnival. It doesn't sound like it's doing a booming business outside those special events. And Danceland does not renew its lease after 1916. The casino, however, is still doing well, and its motion pictures, it's now showing Paramounts. And as you see on the bottom right, in 1915, they're advertising a movie starring Mary Pickford. The Carousel building became the Ocean Garage. Pleasure Bay Amusement stated in the paper that, quote, their venture was disastrous financially and resulted in a loss each year. They sold the former Carousel building in 1918. The structure was enlarged and turned into a motor vehicle garage, which operated until 1955. Storm damage and a large fire are going to cause the Eller family to eventually sell their pavilion. In April 1918, the press reported that waves during a storm undermined the pool and a section of bathhouses. The following year, the Long Branch Daily Record describes the incendiary-caused fire of 1919. Writing the building had been closed since the previous summer and, quote, there were no live wires being conducted into the structures. $7,000 loss. 1920, Lewis W. Crosby will purchase Eller's Beach View Hotel and the pavilions, and they're now going to be known as the Commodore Hotel, Commodore Pavilion, and Sherry Pavilion. Two carpenters working in this area noticed smoke from a rubbish pile and simply went on with their work. What they didn't realize was that when they turned around 15 minutes later, they saw that the bowling alley was on fire and the fire was spreading rapidly from the rubbish pile. Fiegelstein's newspaper stand is where the rubbish was burning, and you can see that small building behind one of Mrs. Heaton's houses and right next to the bowling alley. The fire department, when they got there, was basically putting water on the casino to try to save that building from across the street because of the winds, the strong winds that were driving north. This is 1921, and James Bradley dies at the age of 91. Bradley Beach had hoped for about 20 years that the founder, as he was known, would sell the beachfront to the borough. This is what he did in Asbury Park, or they hoped that maybe he would bequeath it to his namesake town, but neither of those things happened. His estate is going to be sold and the proceeds divided. Voters at this very same time are deciding the future of the beachfront. Before he died in March, there was a vote to purchase the entire beachfront, but it was defeated by 62 votes. After Bradley's death, there's a second vote. This is held in July, and the proposition to purchase won by 58 votes. In October, Justice Samuel Kalish granted an order for the appointment of condemnation commissioners. And now we'll have two really huge condemnations. The first one is against the Bradley property. And in early 1922, the borough paid over $150,000 for the 4,300 feet of James A. Bradley's beachfront. In the second condemnation, there will be proceedings to acquire another 600 feet, basically from the area we've been discussing, the casino, the pavilions, the Beach View Hotel, etc. Over on the map on the right, you can see the two condemnations. The second one will involve all the buildings highlighted in yellow. And on the right, at bottom, you can see that the Bradley Beach House, the brick walk area and all of that was in the first condemnation. If you start at the top left, we can go through the condemnation pretty quickly. The idea here is to fix the value of the beach property. And in the article headline, it points out they bring in a Philadelphia expert to try to assess what each place is worth. In the center, the testimony ends in condemnation. Now it's a question of money. Top right, the borough values the land at $97,000, but the owners want $219,000. The borough actually says that the land isn't worth that much because of beach erosion, that what they have invested in is cheapened by Mother Nature. On the bottom left, the beach award is accepted by the borough. When it comes in at $118,000, they jump at it. And then notice the date, September 21, 1922. The owners are going to appeal the condemnation. And the owners that appeal are essentially going to be the Commodore Hotel and Pavilions and the 3 Heaton houses. The Bradley Beach Board of Commissioners is going to meet shortly thereafter. It's Tuesday, October 3rd. They pass a resolution regarding the sale and removal of buildings on the newly acquired beachfront property. About 10 hours later, a fire breaks out and it destroys the Beachview Hotel and the Pavilion and the 3 Heaton houses. The paper points out that this was quite a coincidence. What this does, however, is it opens Bradley Beach up. They've got the voters on their side. They have the approval. They now have the beachfront through the condemnation, and they plan for a new beachfront. They decide initially there will be municipal ownership of enterprises east of Ocean Avenue. No more private dwellings or holdings on the ocean side of Ocean Avenue. It will belong to the people. There'll be a widening of Ocean Avenue to a more uniform width. They're going to construct a boardwalk, the entire 9/10 of a mile from Ocean Grove to Avon. And they're going to relocate and remodel the old casino building. That's one structure from the past that'll survive into the future. There'll be construction of a pool, bathhouses, pavilions, and esplanades up and down the boardwalk. And they're going to install lights on Ocean Avenue and the boardwalk. As of January 1923, just a few months after that October fire, there's only 2 buildings left east of Ocean Avenue. And they're both north of Ocean Park Avenue. They're actually both above Newark Avenue. And you can see it's the old pool building and then, of course, the casino. The casino is going to have a new beginning. They're going to turn it 90 degrees and move it south. They put turnbuckles in so the building retains its structure. And then they really invest a lot of money into the structure. The old bathhouse on the top right of the map, that was kept in place for the summer of 23 and 24 because a new 500-unit bathhouse pavilion is going to open in 1925. The extensive remodeling of the casino included the construction of 7 stores and the installation of a new dance floor upstairs. It's going to open in its new location, which you see there on the new boardwalk, in 1923. This is an interesting picture that we came across in our research, and it depicts the Park Place and Newark Avenue beaches. And we didn't know at first when this picture might have been taken, but we clearly know that it was in the summer of 23 or the summer of 24, because the relocated and remodeled casino was on the left, and that occurred in the spring of 23. And then the old bathhouse pavilion was torn down at the end of the 1924 season. Now we have a new Newark Avenue group. We have the casino. They build the Esplanade in 1925. And up on the top right, that's an older picture, but it's the 1925 constructed the new bathhouse pavilion. What I thought would be interesting to do would be to see where these sit and compared to what was there. So we're going to compare the footprint of the new and the old beachfront buildings. Outlined in red are the new things. And they are put into the exact position of where they were. I used underground water pipe depictions on maps to make sure we got this right. But as you can see, the entire complex has been pulled back from the ocean. And those of you who know modern day Bradley Beach well know things have been pulled back even further, closer to Ocean Avenue. The boardwalk construction will take place over a period of 2 years. It's going to happen in 3 phases. The first thing they do is go from Cliff Avenue north and from Ocean Park Avenue south. The last thing they actually construct is the part in the middle, the part we've been really focused on, where the old bowling alleys and the pavilions and everything were. The process is simple. Well, they level the sand dunes. They drive pilings, at least 1,460 pilings at about 25 to 30 a day. And then they connect the I-beams, the lateral supports, and then for the 9/10 of a mile, they lay boards to make a boardwalk 24 feet wide. Ocean Avenue is being constructed at the same time, or reconstructed. And to widen it uniformly, land is taken from the beach side that the Board of Commissioners and the Borough now own. The county paid for the paving of the 30-foot center of the avenue. And in both of these pictures, you can see, if you look at the sides of the road, you can see the gravel portions. The town didn't have the money to finish the paving on the entire thing, so they just went with what the county paid for, and then they graveled the rest. And you'll notice the light standard on the with the bottom arrow. That's in the very center. This one is Ocean Avenue and Ocean Park Avenue. And then if your eyes are good and you can go further north, you'll see there are light stanchions at every intersection, all the way up and down. One of the things they did was to put underground wiring in, so there'd be no telephone poles down at the beachfront. The 4th Avenue Bathhouse Pavilion is also improved. The pavilion was constructed in 1922, and over on the right-hand side, the bathhouses are improved. They construct 82 more, and they actually use some of the wood from the old Newark Avenue bathhouses. When they salvage the wood, they find that some of it is still in pretty good shape. The Beach Plaza. This is sometimes referred to as the Parkway or the Big Lawn. There's other names for it. But this particular picture is at Lorraine Avenue. And the newspaper reported that ashes were mixed with topsoil and laid in preparation for the planting of grass for lawns, quote, in place of the usual ill-appearing sand dunes. The picture on the bottom is from the other direction, looking up towards Lorraine Avenue. And if you look at the bottom right picture, you can see the large grass areas up near Newark and Cliff Avenue, extending upwards towards Ocean Grove. On this plaza between Brindley and Lorraine Avenues in 1925 were placed the 2 statues that have figured prominently in the news on several occasions, but the story behind where they came from really has been buried. One of the things that we were able to come across on this is that we found this newspaper article from 1925. These were a gift to Bradley Beach. There was no paper trail of money because they were a gift. Samuel Metzger of Asbury Park presented the sculptures to Commissioner John Rogers. Metzger and Rogers, we found, were both members of the Asbury Park Elks Lodge, and we think that's how they became associated. Metzger worked with the Guggenheim family, and according to the articles, the dolphin pedestals came from the Guggenheim estate. The problem is, up in Deal and in that area, there were several, at least 4 Guggenheim estates. So the question was, which one did it come from? Very recently, within the last couple of weeks, we found out that the beach ornaments were originally displayed at Whitehall, the former Simon and Olga Guggenheim estate in Deal. And I want to thank Rob Stillwagon for providing this picture and some of the story behind it. His great grandfather had a business up there, and he took care of some of the properties. He had a company that serviced the lawns and the shrubs and trees and whatnot. This building actually burned in 1916. So where the statues were from 1916 to 1925 is uncertain, but we do know that Metzger, who worked with the Guggenheims, did acquire them. The $200,000 McCabe-Lorraine bathing complex was constructed and finished in 1926. They made it of brown brick, tiles, concrete, and other materials to make it fireproof. It consisted of 2 pools. Here you can see the large pool and what they would refer to as the kiddie pool at the top of the picture, and a balcony. These were on the McCabe Avenue side. There were also several stores, including a concession that offered skee ball on the Lorraine Avenue end, and a bathing casino with 600 bathhouses, plus hot and cold seawater baths. This picture is from the McCabe Avenue side, picture on the top right, looking towards the southwest. A couple other pictures of this complex. First of all, in yellow on the map, you can see where the pool is with relationship to the hot baths, and also where the bathhouses were. You can also see the location of the pavilion on the east side of the boardwalk. And the arrows basically will show you where these things were. The balcony will last all the way up until the 1960s, and then that will come down. And eventually, by the 1990s, the pool is taken out. North of there is what was popular from the 30s onward, the miniature golf. Over on the left is a picture showing some of the storm damage during one of the years at the south end of the pavilion. And on the bottom left picture is an early picture. That's when they had the sliding board that proved to be too dangerous, and that was later removed. I'm going to talk for a minute about bathing in the 20s. This is a little bizarre in some ways. The 20s start out with feminine bathers being told they must be completely covered, including their ankles, and no abbreviated trunks for men are allowed. But then in 1922, 3, and 4, Bradley Beach is holding bathing suit parades and pageants, and hundreds of entrants. At least in 1924, there were over 1,000 people that entered into the bathing suit pageant. In 1926, they announced there'll be no more bathing censors, no regulations, let your conscience be your guide. Following year, they say police and lifeguards will exercise vigilance. During the 20s, they have night bathing. In the ocean, they use large searchlights on some of the new buildings and project it into the water. And then in 1927, they have night bathing in the pool, the new pool at McCabe, in the McCabe-Lorraine complex. Beach tags come in at the very end of the 20s. Summer residents, property owners, and hotel guests receive an ID tag. Everyone else had to use a municipal bathhouse. So they were going to collect money for swimming in Bradley Beach. The community treasure of the casino, unfortunately, only makes it to 1932. On the north end, which would be the right-hand side of the picture, on the north end, there is a concession that is owned by Samuel Scopas. And the Scopas, in the off-season, the Scopas pavilion, or the Scopas store, develops a fire. It totally destroys this remnant from the first beachfront. The second building that's put in, you can see on the lower picture, the original one. And if you look at the map, you can see the original one had a longer footprint. The second one that was put in, shown in red on the map, was made of concrete. They built the firewall on it up above the roof line, and they used tiling and other things to try to keep that as a safe building. As kids, we could notice that on the south side of that building, you could actually see the old foundation. We never knew what that was. Over on the right on the map, if you look very carefully, you'll notice that those buildings, the Esplanade and the red building, the casino, they're not totally parallel. They're actually off. It was even more visual when you were there back in the 50s. We actually asked why that was. Why weren't they built the same way? Nobody could really give us a good answer. But we have found that answer, and that is that when they moved the casino, turned it 90 degrees and moved it south, they aligned it with Ocean Avenue. But then if you recall, they changed Ocean Avenue and they widened it. So the Boardwalk and the Esplanade were made parallel to the new Ocean Avenue. What Bradley Beach now has are three 20th century building complexes. The Newark Avenue Group has a pavilion, a casino, and a bathhouse. They have the same thing at the McCabe-Lorraine complex. And then down at the 4th Avenue Group, they have the pavilion. The three pavilions look somewhat alike, but the bathhouse groups are all designed somewhat differently. Thank you very much for attending. I think I ran over just a couple minutes or so. We did get a little bit of a late start.
Thank you, Bob. That was terrific. We do have some questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer those questions first, and then possibly we'll have some others. A couple of questions asked about the Chinese American community in Bradley Beach. Do you want to make any comments on that?
Well, just a little bit. As a kid, I remember when I visited grandfather over on Newark Avenue, that he was up on the 500 block, down on the 400 block, and perhaps even on the 300 block. When we walked down towards the beach from grandfather's, it was quite obvious that we were in a different environment than we had elsewhere in town. There were quite a few families, Chinese families, that lived there. And Bradley Beach had, by that point, become kind of like a United Nations. I mean, we had quite a few different religions. We had at least 5 houses of worship, and soon I think they ended up having a total of 6. And going to Bradley Beach Grammar School, the public school, we got to mix with so many different people from so many different national backgrounds. But the Chinese group up on the north end were primarily summer visitors. And I don't know.
Actually, we have a bit of a history in our archives about that. The Chinese were first introduced to Bradley Beach by the Methodist Church in New York City on the Lower East Side. During the summer, for 1 month, they would bring in Chinese from Chinatown to summer in villas that they had around Cliff and Newark Avenue. And then another month, they would bring in the Italians from the Lower East Side. And both groups actually wound up enjoying it so much in Bradley Beach that they eventually bought. The Chinese community bought up houses along Newark Avenue largely, and it became known as Chinatown at the shore. And basically, there are still Chinese families that own some of the homes on Newark Avenue.
Very good.
Somebody has asked a very interesting question. They're all interesting. Let me see if I can find it again. It was an early question. Nancy Lasher asks, early in your presentation, you mentioned the AME church camp as among the first presents. Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, we were able to document that the AME church from Asbury Park, which was not allowed to join the annual Ocean Grove camp meetings, and was certainly frowned upon from using the Asbury Park beachfront. James A. Bradley originally had a rule that blacks were not allowed to swim in his ocean or be on his beach. He had a sweetheart deal where the state had granted him riparian rights to the Atlantic Ocean to some distance off the coast. So he did control part of the ocean and the beach. So they evidently came to Bradley Beach. We don't know if that was by invitation or if they just did that. But for 3 years, they were able to do that. We found an article in the Asbury Park Journal, that was James A. Bradley's newspaper, in which he made a comment that was not very praiseworthy of the fact that they were there. And after 3 years, we don't find any more record of the AME Church having camp meetings at the north end of Bradley Beach, or what was then Ocean Park.
Nancy also asked if it was typical for nonprofits to develop at the beach.
Well, I don't know if it was typical. It was surprising to us. First of all, we had no knowledge. I did have some knowledge of the Jersey City group that was there. I remember grandfather and the family talking about that, but I had never heard of the Philadelphia Home for the Homeless. We did quite a bit of research on them all the way into the 20th century to try to find out precisely how long they were around. And we did find that they never again had another beachfront home. They couldn't afford it. But we don't have knowledge of any more than that, except when I was a kid, Mo Geller and his wife would help bring some kids down from Newark, and they would open up the beachfront. I remember they served hot dogs and gave the kids a day at the beach, and the hot dogs were boiled hot dogs. I do recall that.
Yeah, there actually were several villas that were run by various church groups. There was the Baptist Cottage. There also was the Cliff Villa. So different denominations brought down people in the summer to stay at their villas. This was fairly common practice right up through the 60s, actually. Okay, any other questions?
I saw one question in the chat in reference to the fact there were lots of fires. I think Nancy asked this, and whether or not it was normal for this era. It certainly was normal for the era to have a lot of fires, but to have fires in buildings that are not supplied with electricity in the off season, that would not be normal. There was evidence of people during the wintertime going into some of these large hotels and other buildings and stealing pipes. And there was also evidence of just by the coincidence of when some of these things happened, that it certainly would raise eyebrows as to whether or not they were incendiary or naturally caused. And quite frankly, most of them were not naturally caused.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the same was true of fires later into the 70s and 80s. The Lorraine Hotel and the Bradley Hotel next to it both burnt down in 1974, luckily without any loss of life, but that was another one of those coincidences.
Yeah, it was more than a coincidence on the Lorraine, because there was a fire at the Lorraine and it appeared to have been intentionally set. And it didn't work at taking down the building. And then within a month, there was a second fire in the winter, and that did destroy both buildings.
Yeah. And of course, the great tragedy was the Brinley Hotel, which lost, I believe, 23 lives were lost in that.
At least it may have been higher.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Someone asks, what is the definition of a bathhouse? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yep.
First of all, in terms of the spelling, in all the original newspaper articles, and I'm talking dozens just on that topic, they use two words, bath house or bathhouses. In the modern era, like many other words that are associated with the beachfront, including beachfront, the words are combined as one. But in terms of what they offered, Some of the definitions include simply these little locker spaces that might be as small as 4 foot by 4 foot, but that complex might also include hot and cold seawater baths or hot and cold water baths, so that they are bath houses in a couple sense. They're like dressing room locations, and they're also bath houses.
Christy Nesbitt asks if you know when the jetties went in.
That's a good question. Bradley Beach prided itself on not having jetties. It was one of the very last towns on the entire North Jersey coast to bring jetties in. And I can recall the installation of the jetties and the improvement of them in the 1950s. These huge trucks would come in with rocks, normally maybe 3 rocks on a flatbed truck. And then they would be, they built a special plank platform so they could ride out onto the jetty and be deposited. But Bradley Beach was among the last to do it. And the relationship, just to expand on that for a minute, the relationship between sand dunes, offshore deposits of sand, like sandbars, and the lateral currents that were interrupted by the sand dunes, that whole thing is something that unfortunately was never fully understood.
No, it
And
certainly wasn't.
Yeah, the sand dunes, if you recall, in Avon, Belmar, and elsewhere, would deposit large amounts of sand on the south side and on the north side. And that's what happened to Bradley Beach. That long jetty at Avon on the north side of Avon meant that Bradley Beach would not get its annual replenishment of sand.
Yep. This is what happened to my family home on Long Island in West Hampton Beach. The jetties were put in incorrectly because of political pressure. And as a result, my family's home washed out to sea in 1982. It was the first of over 450 homes to wash out to sea. We had a 20-year lawsuit with the federal government, the state government, the county government, and finally won it when the Corps of Engineers switched sides and admitted that they had been forced by political pressure to put in the jetties incorrectly. Jetties are a very tricky thing, and they have to be just right or they don't work.
Exactly. The other thing was, in terms of definitions, jetties are at inlets, like at Shark River Inlet. The others are technically referred to as groins.
Groins.
So they're made of the same material. And as kids, we always referred to them as jetties. There was a question I saw that came in from Grace Toy, and she says, I remember Woolies Fish Market in Howell, though. Yeah, Woolies from Newark Avenue did move to Howell Township. It is the one and the same family. And so, yeah, what was it, 1960? So from 1906 to 1960, they were on Newark Avenue, and then they moved to Howell.
Well, looking to see if there are any more questions. There's a discussion here about photo booths, which were great fun.
I don't have any recollection of photo booths here. I know there were some in Asbury, and there may have been one on the Bradley beachfront, but I don't know of it. There were scales where you could be weighed, and that actually became a concession. One of the great things, and I didn't go into any detail or really perhaps even mention it, is the fact that all of those buildings had stores which became concessions and were great money revenue earners for Bradley Beach. The Newark Avenue, the original casino that they moved and was burned, that had 7 stores initially. In the replacement, the one that I remember growing up, the brick building, they only had 3. But they had them at the 4th Avenue Pavilion and at the McCabe-Lorraine complex. They also had concessions of being able to rent beach chairs, beach umbrellas, and whatnot. Bradley Beach was able to have quite a bit of money come in. But what most of the public didn't know is that it spent one heck of a lot of money, paying for lifeguards and especially insurance. The insurance costs of a shore community with a boardwalk were extremely high. Every day, literally every day, somebody would step on splinters or, have a step on a piece of glass on the beach or whatever. And in some cases, more serious things would happen. But it's clear that the revenue that came from those concessions was extremely helpful to the reducing or keeping taxes down.
Two final questions. Steve Barkin asked, what happened to the kiddie rides?
Yeah, I recall the kiddie rides, and I don't know, why they were taken out. Another thing I haven't mentioned is that they did have playground equipment. When I was a kid, there was playground equipment on the south side of the 2nd Avenue beach near Evergreen Avenue, and on the in the area between McCabe, actually around Ocean Park, between Ocean Park and Park Place. There were a swing set and a couple other things. Those were intentionally purchased and placed there. The equipment was purchased for the enjoyment of the people in town and the summer tourists.
And one final question, a very interesting one, actually, and that is, I'll get it up here in a second. I lost it. Yes, from Grace Toy. One final question. Can you share your thoughts about the future of Bradley Beach, especially in the presence of Sandy and COVID? Well,
I'll start that and then I'll turn that over to you, Paul.
Okay.
But Bradley Beach has been really quite resilient. And when you think of, and we didn't go into a lot of detail, we tried to hold it to 45 minutes. We didn't go into the construction of all the major hotels. We tried to stay close to just the beachfront. But the hotel era, starting with the Beachview Hotel and then the Lorraine and the Sea Cliff and the others, there were quite a few hotels constructed. But as people came to the shore, they realized that they liked it so much, they wanted to enjoy it. As a kid, I thoroughly enjoyed September. We used to applaud when we'd see all the buses leaving Bradley Beach, literally coming down McCabe Avenue and Ocean Park and whatnot, taking the summer folks home. So we'd have the beach to ourselves. The water was still warm, and in some years they would actually extend the lifeguard season briefly to make it safe for the people that were year-round residents. But I think Bradley Beach has shown some real resilience in terms of I think there's only so much ocean, and the fact that all around the country the prices for that type of living, the prices on homes has gone way up over recent years, that even with the hurricanes and whatnot, I think as long as they keep some dunes out on the beach and let them grow, and they, when necessary, do the replenishment of sand, as they have done with the Corps of Engineers and whatnot, I think that it's got a long future, even with the rising sea levels.
Well, that, of course, remains to be seen. Obviously, we've been very lucky in that we're just a little bit higher than some of the towns around us, like Belmar, which flooded badly in Sandy. But obviously, depends on how many feet the sea continues to rise over the decades.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
As far as COVID goes, I think that actually we found that luckily it does not seem to spread outdoors, and nobody seems to be particularly worried about it anymore, especially outdoors.
Yeah, there was a comment that I would like to respond to by Steve Barkin. He said that when he was a kid, that he never went to Newark or Cliff, but the same would be true. I grew up on McCabe Avenue, and McCabe Avenue Beach was like our beach. We felt sort of some ownership of that beach. It was the easiest one to walk to. We just walked a few blocks and you were on the beach. We did go to Newark Avenue. Occasionally, if you had a few cents, you could go up there. And if we had a few cents, we'd go over to Lorraine Avenue to the Penny Arcade. Yeah, everybody tended to have their favorite beach. And I had some friends who were over on Fifth Avenue, but their favorite beach was Park Place. I'm not sure why it wasn't Fourth or Fifth. In any event, that did bring back some memories when we were going through this. The Penny Arcade was probably the place, the building that we frequented the most. We spent little time in the pool, just a few trips here and there. Mostly we were on the beach, and then of course walking the boards in later years, and riding bicycles in the off season. So we got a lot of use from the beachfront. Good times, good memories. I even had to clean the beach. I cleaned the beach because I needed 2 jobs to work my way through college. So I had a full job at the old Neptune ShopRite, and then I would clean the beach for $5 a day. We would start up at Ocean Grove and walked all the way south to Avon with peach baskets, picking up all of the rubbish every night, starting at about 7 o'clock, 6:30 at night. And I want to tell you, the weight of a New York Times newspaper on a Sunday when it's sogging wet because the tide had come in, it not only would fill up your peach basket, it would strain you to bring it to the big barrel that you would deposit it in. Steve should probably be unmuted because he mentions that they rented umbrellas and chairs on the beaches, and that was a concession friends of his parents had bought from the town.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
50 cents.
50 cents. Wow.
There are considerably more this year. Well, I think we've gone over our time, and it's been a fascinating talk. We must have more of these. There are a lot of things we can talk about. The future years after the 40s and 50s and 60s, going all the way up to 92, and afterwards, obviously, the beach has changed dramatically. And a lot of other things have changed dramatically. The whole period you're talking about, in addition to the hotels, there were boarding houses. Of course, boarding houses are not allowed in Bradley Beach anymore, but they certainly had an impact.
Yeah, there were quite a few boarding houses. I mean, up and down, first, second, third, or the 100, 200, 300 blocks in particular. The Bradley Beach population just increased dramatically. I mean, I've seen estimates back in the 50s to where the population of approximately 5,000 would expand to 25, 30, and they said on 4th of July weekend and other times it might even go up to 50,000 people. I'm not sure who was doing the counting, but clearly there were a lot of people that visited Bradley Beach. And in the era of lots of trains, at one point, 90 trains came to Bradley Beach. 90. That's 45 north, 45 south. And trains, some of them, when they were 10, 15 car long trains, they could bring thousands of people on every train. So,
Changing times.
yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. If you'd like to review this information, we've recorded it. It will be available from our website and from our Facebook page. We did try as an experiment to also transmit it with Facebook Live. It's still going on. And that recording also will be available on our Facebook page, which you can search for. It's under Bradley Beach Historical Society. And our website is www.bbhistory.org. So you will be able to find the video of this presentation there and review some of these new names that even I had not heard about. the Costers, for instance. Very interesting that we had a whole number of pioneers who developed this town early. Thank you again, Bob and Sue Flood, for preparing this presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Take care.